We formed as a consortium of 6 major partners. We're not here to take over from those partner groups. We're here to support them, to grow them, to accelerate their mahi, and to try to bring efficiencies across those groups. All around that kind of recognition that we can go faster and further when we work together. There is so much burden and expectations put on volunteer entities, whereas for us, if we have our paid staff who can help support those volunteers, help empower the community groups, help to train them, grow them, it just means it reduces our volunteer burden, the volunteer fatigue. But again, it's all about that collective impact. It's important that we always acknowledge and appreciate that conservation work is needed everywhere. Conservation isn't a nice to have. Conservation, it should be at the core of everything we do, because healthy environments underpin everything.
Hello, kia ora. I'm Anna.
And I'm Callum from Conservation Amplified.
And you're listening to the People Helping Nature podcast.
Our mission is to make conservation mainstream, one topic at a time.
Today we're going on a virtual journey. We're flying out of our office in Mount Maunganui. We're taking a trip down from the North Island to the South Island and into the Southern Lakes. Welcome, Paul, the CEO of Southern Lakes Sanctuary.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So would you like to start by introducing yourself and your role at Southern Lakes Sanctuary?
Sure. So kia ora, Paul Kavanagh, Tukalgangawa. So I'm Paul, and I'm very lucky to be the CEO for Southern Lakes Sanctuary, based in Tahuna, Queenstown. But our project covers the whole of the Queenstown Lakes District. So I guess my role, chief coffee drinker and meeting haver, I suppose, while our crew are out doing the hard yards. So a wonderful project to lead. And yeah, I count myself very lucky every day coming into work.
Good to see you again, Paul. So Paul actually was part of the very start of my own conservation career. So it's really full circle to be talking to Paul today. I'm super excited about it. So to kick us off, can you please share when and why Southern Lakes Sanctuary was founded?
Yeah, so we operationalized in 2021. So we signed our trust deed in June 2021, but our journey kind of predates that. The first discussions around what became Southern Lakes Sanctuary started in as early as kind of 2018. And the need to bring all the amazing mahi that's happening across our district into one kind of cohesive strategy. Because we are a consortium of 6 conservation entities spanning the whole of the district, from Makarora, Matukituki, Wanaka, Muratapu, Queenstown and Glenorchy, so covering a huge area. We formed as a consortium of 6 major partners.
So an umbrella of conservation initiatives that are very wide and diverse and varied, but ultimately representing a region whilst supporting all along the ground mahi. Is that a good way of putting it? Or?
Yep. And we always kind of toy around with the different metaphors, like are we an umbrella, or are we the foundations and things? Because I guess a big thing for us is we're not here to take over from those partner groups. We're here to support them, to grow them, to accelerate their mahi, and to try to, again, bring efficiencies across those groups. All around that kind of recognition that we can go faster and further when we work together. So it's all built on collaboration and collective impact. People realize that we need to do more, and that we can do more when we work together, and also when we start to kind of professionalize the sector. Because I think in this country, like across the Mutu, there is so much burden and expectations put on volunteer entities. Whereas for us, if we have our paid staff who can help support those volunteers, help empower the community groups, help to train them, grow them, it just means it reduces our volunteer burden, the volunteer fatigue. But again, it's all about that collective impact. So it is amazing seeing the momentum, not just here in the Southern Lakes region, but across the country.
Yes, and you're speaking out of my heart here a little bit, because volunteers do so much across New Zealand, and supporting them is just really fueling that all of this amazing mahi keeps going, and that it's a bit more sustainable. So for your project in particular, can you describe your operations area in terms of size, habitats and biodiversity?
So as I said, we're kind of a consortium of 6 major groups spanning the whole of the Queenstown Lakes area. It's a really ambitious, really big project, and it is going to need to be kind of multi-generational. It is in line with Predator Free 2050 and the whole of our operational area. Eventually, we want to cover 850,000 hectares. Across our project area, there's something like approaching 40 native species that are at some level of threatened or at risk. Those species need more support, and that comes from providing a professional paid operational arm who can support those amazing groups. And like we only came about four years ago. Some of our partner groups having doing it a lot longer than us. Like we've groups in Matukituki Charitable Trust who've been going for over 10 years. Same for Rupert and Dart was 2013. Whakatipu Wildlife Trust 2015. In Makarora, Central Otago Lakes branch of Forest and Bird, having gone for 26, 27 years. So
Wow.
these guys have been doing the hard yards for a long time. Amazing groups. It's the backbone of conservation in this country, that volunteer groups. And we're trying to do the work that either they can't do, like the really multi-day backcountry missions that it's not fair to expect volunteers to do, or the work that they don't really want to do, which is the boring stuff like helping with organising baits and rosters and health and safety reporting and things. I think those volunteers deserve to do the mahi that they want to do. They want to be out in the hills counting mohua and trapping rats. They don't want to be doing paperwork and things. So if our guys can really ease those pressures on them, then it really helps to ease that burden, but also reignite their kind of love, their passion for doing this while they first got involved.
And I think community and volunteering are one of the main superpowers of this country and of this culture. What are the key issues that you're addressing or your project area is facing?
As I said earlier, we do have up to 40 or approaching 40 endangered species or threatened species in our project area. And again, a key driver behind that is introduced mammalian predators. So a huge amount of our work is protecting native species from those introduced predators. Pre-Southern Lake Sanctuary, there was about 6,400 traps across our partner groups. We've over doubled that. So we've just hit over nearly 13,500 traps and bait stations, things across our partner groups. So our staff have directly built, purchased, helped to install, I think 6,750 additional traps in the last 4 years. But again, it's also trying to empower those community groups, help training, help recruiting, help to ease the burden, and just bring better efficiencies to try to do more conservation work over larger areas.
I guess for you guys down there, it's also quite often not the easiest terrain to work in, being a lot of alpine area down there. So you obviously have to do your predator control, and you had an amazing starting point with stuff already being in place, being able to grow that. So how many predators have you removed across the board roughly since you founded Southern Lakes Sanctuary?
It's over 70,000 animals in traps alone. So it is a serious amount of work going on down here. What we're trying to also do is increase our monitoring outputs and try to be more strategic about the trapping. So integrating new tech and things, for example, but also focusing our efforts, our mahi, into areas with high biodiversity potential. Our work does span kind of national park work. It's also urban and peri-urban areas, and there's different biodiversity values in those different areas. None of our conservation groups across the country have unlimited resources, so we need to make sure we're tracking the impacts of our work through monitoring, and really importantly, what impact we're having on our native species. That's the important thing, is how we're measuring the impact on the species we're trying to protect.
Yeah, right. And as I understand it, you've really embraced technology to scale up your effective area, your effective reach, the amount of species you can catch, all these important metrics. So what is the role of tech and AI in your project area and what you're doing?
Yeah, great question. So that is one of our kind of core strategic focus areas. One of our core poles around openness to work with any group who wants to work with us, openness to collaborate, but also an openness to innovate. Very often it's not our tech, but we want to be the ideal trial site for some of that exciting new tech. Importantly, there's no silver bullets. There's no quick, easy solutions, but it is amazing seeing the new raft of tools that we can add to our toolkit in the last kind of 5 years. Self-resetting traps, things like that, toxin delivery devices, but also better monitoring and reporting tools as well. So it's really, really exciting, but it doesn't replace the need for boots on the ground, hard work. It just means we can do more conservation work more effectively over larger areas. And for us, we're currently in the predator suppression space. We're trying to prevent local extinctions. There's also amazing work happening in the elimination space where we can get numbers down to zero in certain areas and defend it. So all of these new exciting developments are genuinely game-changing technology. And it is amazing to see, and it just means our ambitious goals are looking more and more achievable every year.
Yeah, for sure. I happen to think about, there's a lot of fear around AI, for example, around will I lose my job? How will this affect my life? And for many places, that is a real risk. But I happen to think of conservation almost like doctors, in that as this technology advances, it's not like doctors just stop being needed. It's just that they can serve 5 times as many patients. And it's the same for conservation, right? If you have the technology in place, it's not that you stop doing it because a robot's out doing it. It's that you can just get so much more done. So how much more can you actually serve? Like, have you quantified how much more landscape or how many more traps you can effectively manage with technology?
Depends on the tool. So for example, with self-resetting traps, we can cover more areas with a single trap because that trap's always available to catch, whereas single set traps is not. So for example, with a possum's home range, say the average is around just under like 1.9 hectares, I think, for a male. So you traditionally would have a trap every 1.5, 2 hectares. With some of those resetting traps, we're able to use them much more sparsely, so you can cover greater areas. Same with monitoring tools and stuff. It's a really exciting space. Again, AI is none of it's perfect, any of this new technology, but it's definitely all moving in the right direction. And yeah, we are increasingly using these tools. We still are very, very reliant on single set box traps for stoat control, for example. But definitely some of that new tech is really, really exciting.
But I also think keeping hold on the old technologies, like that's where your volunteers come in again, right? That is something that they can continue to do and really be involved. And you're just supplementing those harder areas and increasing the quantity of what you can do. But what about quality? Like, do we know a lot about, let's say, catch rates or animal welfare with those new tools?
Good question. So we can only use traps that have been NAWAC certified, so Animal Welfare Standard certified. So that's really important. Obviously, animal welfare is why we all get into this. We're all animal lovers. Regarding kind of effectiveness, it depends on the tool again. But for example, we're working with EP32 AI traps. So it's amazing self-resetting trap. And we've paired that with a node system. So it's a company called FTP Solutions. So from the office, we can measure battery levels, bait levels, what they're catching, when they're catching in real time. So some of those 8520 AI traps, like they might catch 40, 50 possums a year. And in that time, our staff might only have to visit the trap 2 or 3 times a year. So it's much more effective. It's less time going into some difficult terrain as well. And you're getting much more effectiveness of protection as well.
How does that work? So you've got like the self-resetting trap, and then does that connect to like Starlink or some satellites that beams it back to you, or how does it actually communicate?
Yeah, so basically the node fixes to the trap, and we are using there's a couple of applications of that node, not just on the AT traps, but basically it creates what's called a mesh network system. So it creates comms in an area. We install big gateways on the tops of big mountains here, and it uses RFI, so it's basically radio frequency, and the traps all talk to each other. So it creates a daisy chain approach. We're starting to use those traps increasingly, really, really exciting. And there's also an AI camera on those traps as well. So we started using them about 3 years ago now, because a big thing for us around these areas is kia as well. So one of the species we're most trying to protect, our wonderful kia, real icon here in the South Island, historically hasn't been a kia safe possum traps. Kia are neophilic, incredibly intelligent, same learning ability as a kind of 3 or 4-year-old child. I know you guys had Lydia and Tamsin from Kia Conservation Trust, who are wonderful. So we started working with the company FTP Solutions. We had about 200 of those noded AT220 traps, and while they built up the image library to train the software to identify target species. So as an animal's approaching the trap, it fires off a series of photos, and they've trained using machine learning, AI. They've trained the trap for what a target species is, so what a possum is and what a rodent is, and the trap can decide in milliseconds whether to waken up or whether it's not. So it's an emerging tech. We've put a lot of resources into it, but we have received permission to use those traps in Kia habitat now. So really, really exciting. It gives us a new tool to the toolkit, and one that we were lacking. So again, not a silver bullet, but really, really exciting. Yeah, and again, it reduces the need for our staff to go out into some of those difficult terrain.
I'm curious about how this fits into a financial model, and we're going to come to funding later in this podcast. But if you put a standard box trap out there, you've got to check it every, depending what week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on your cycle, your site, etc. These traps must have a huge capital outlay up front. Would that mean, like, if, say, funding was unavailable in the future, that it would be a lot easier to service this vast network without the ongoing overhead if you needed to?
Yep, definitely. The business case is really strong for that when we're paying for staff to go into these areas. I think, as we talked about earlier with volunteers, sometimes people don't factor in the volunteer cost of checking traps, because a lot of groups are volunteer driven. So kind of said it's free to check traps. Historically, finding funding for people is much, much tougher than finding funding for things. And that is shifting, I think. But again, what we've noticed is that the tech and innovation story does attract different potential funders. So some people will get really interested by the kind of hearts and minds approach around protecting our Tonga species, but others are really interested in tech and innovation and the integration of that into conservation. So we've had some success of trying to kind of tailor our pitch for the audience, and approaching different potential funders who would be potentially interested in the tech, so funding some of that work. But it's a really strong business case, some of these new tools where you don't need to go out 12 times a year to check traps or check monitoring devices, because again, monitoring is really, really labor intensive. A lot of it's quite specialist work. So if we can reduce the costs of having to send staff out, because a lot of our work is helicoptering into remote areas as well. So the less time we need to spend out there, yeah, it does definitely add to that business case.
And I guess also with you guys down there, if you have bad weather stints, you can't even get up there. So if you've got your traps sitting up there doing the mahi while you're sheltering from the storm, how much better can it get?
Or if it's a good day for skiing.
Yeah. Have you talked to our staff? Yeah, they do like that. But yeah, that is really, really important, because again, we've prolonged avalanche risk. We are this winter, and we're just coming into spring now. The weather's been really, really unsettled. Rivers are running really high because we had a really dry, mild winter. But now spring has been really, really changeable. So it means when you're not out there, the trap is still working. Because a lot of our remote areas, we can't do trap checks from end of May through till September, October because of avalanche risk. So with self-resetting traps, obviously they keep working even if we can't get in to access them.
Yeah, and I think that is super crucial because nature doesn't stop for winter, right? So if we can match that with using tech, I think that's absolutely fabulous, and just improving what we're doing left, right, and center. But other than the predators, which are such a common topic, are there any other key threats that your area is facing?
I guess land use changes is always a big thing. Climate change is a huge issue because that's also changing, like beach mast events, for example, which is changing predator behaviors. It's also changing food availability for a native species. So climate change is a huge thing. And obviously our region is growing really quickly, but we are blessed that our area does still have a lot of really wild spaces, and we just need to protect those spaces.
So protecting is part of it. The other part's monitoring. And how does technology tie into your monitoring approach?
So that company, FTP Solutions, we're just trialing a real-time trail camera currently. So that will help massively. We do a lot of work with eDNA. We're also doing a really cool project with using acoustic recording devices for mohua monitoring. We're working with a group called Digilab, who are a really awesome company. So we install acoustic recording devices around known mohua breeding sites. A lot of areas where we've banded birds. They take the information from the acoustic recording devices. They turn it into spectrograms so they can visualize the signatures and the calls, and they can compare it. So they think in time they can build up a picture to identify individual mohua. So it means from year to year we can assess survivorship, we can see gender biases, because again, an issue for mohua, like a lot of our native manu and native birds, is that you get a lot of males to females because the females are being predated on. So it helps to much more thoroughly monitor species going forward. So really, really exciting stuff. So that's incredibly exciting project, and it will hopefully mean in time we could have a passive method of monitoring mohua, really in-depth monitoring as well. So, and they're going to in time hopefully be able to do that for more and more species.
It's fantastic. And the importance of these toolbox of uses for monitoring in the conservation space is critical. I think as a sector and as conservation folk, we mostly understand the need for monitoring, but from time to time I do bump into groups that are just rolling out with action. They don't monitor their results, and they might say, hey, we've caught this many predators. You say, well, how many is that of what's in the environment? And they go, well, we don't know, we're just catching and killing stuff. Or, there's other versions of that. Can you just explain why we should actually monitor?
Great question. And we've the same issues where if we're trying to find funding for out in the field trapping or whatever, it's a lot easier than finding funding for monitoring. But if you liken it to any business, imagine running a business and not tracking your business performance. That's in essence what we're doing if we're not monitoring both for predators, but also more importantly, the impact on our native species. Because again, we are sometimes hyper-focused on trapping in this country, but we do that to protect our native species. So the most important metric is what impact we're having on our native species that we're trying to protect.
Thank you for clarifying that. It's definitely sometimes that we just totally forget about, which isn't cool, which we need to rethink. Big picture, also doing our pre-monitoring, like knowing what's there in the first place. I just want to go back a little bit of what you said with monitoring often is a specialized job. So it's really cool that you've explained that AI bridges that gap. So with that being said, like how much more monitoring are you now able to do with that tech coming in, and how much more species can you monitor?
We're getting there, but we're definitely not there yet. It's exciting with the new tools, and also exciting that there's increasing appreciation for the need for monitoring. But like we could have all 23 of our staff doing biodiversity monitoring. That's how big a job it is, how important a job it is, but we're not quite there in the funding space yet. The new tools will help, but again, most of them are still at trial phase or proof of concept phase, so we're not quite there, but definitely moving in the right direction.
And one thing that really excites me is just filling the knowledge gaps that we currently have by knowing more, connecting the dots between species. I think that's really, really great. But I want to shift gear a little bit and celebrate a milestone, which is reintroducing takahe into one of your areas. So first of all, congratulations. That's amazing. Talk us through it. How does that work? Because you obviously need to meet requirements for that to happen.
It's an incredible story. It's something that we all get into conservation for occasions like this. It's a beautiful story about collaboration, because again, it's involving many, many partners, amazing landowners. They've been doing the hard work to protect the whenua, to protect the land for many, many generations. Doc Takahe team, the wider Doc team, there's Rupert Dart Wildlife Trust, our partner group. There is like Tahu. So it's just been an incredible story, an incredible example of what you can achieve with that collaborative approach to conservation. So the Reese Valley is now home to over 50 takahe, making it the second largest wild population. So really exciting. So they were returned to that area in February 2025 after an absence of maybe hundreds of years. This is a species that has been declared extinct a couple of times. So it's a huge, huge, huge win for conservation, but the hard work continues.
So now that you've got takahe back and protecting them by suppressing the predators, how do you manage such a vulnerable species ongoing on site?
Returning them to that area is one thing, but then ongoing protection is another. So the trapping work is in partnership with our partners at Rupert Dart Wildlife Trust. And then the monitoring we do with the Takahe Recovery Group. So our staff are out with TR8. So all the birds have a transmitter and our staff are out monitoring those birds. This is me waving an imaginary TR8. So our staff are going out and doing that monitoring. It will ramp up now coming into breeding season. But yeah, most of the birds have kind of stayed where we hoped they'd stay. We did have one wandering male, because again, the birds are quite young birds that were released into the reefs. And we'd one bird, Frost, who ended up in downtown Glenorchy, so on the golf course in Glenorchy. So we had to go and catch him up down the swampy areas behind the golf course and return him back up valley. He'd walked something like 24, 25 kilometers as the crow flies in about 2 and a bit weeks. But obviously closer to townships, there's more risk. So it was important we sent him back up valley, and he continued up north, and he's now right up the head of the valley, I think. So yeah, it's an absolute joy for our staff to do that work, that monitoring work, because again, this is why they get involved in conservation. It's these sort of huge, exciting projects. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be involved in a project with so many partners.
That's fantastic, and giving credit where it's due. Amazing work from not just you guys, but everyone involved. But I think it's important just for people who aren't heavily involved in conservation to keep in mind that you might see a takahe and being released, and that's fantastic. You might see a kiwi being hatched, or many of these beautiful, truly magical moments. But that doesn't take away from all the work in the background, all the hard work that doesn't get acknowledged, the monitoring, the testing of different techniques, the coordinating of volunteers, the applying for funding. Like, these are critical, and we can't have these beautiful moments without all the mahi that goes on in the background.
Yeah, completely agree. So the messaging is always really important in that space. But what it does do is it gives hope to people. It's those lovely nuggets, those lovely good news stories. The day of the Takahe release in February, we had probably 170 people up the valley. It was a huge deal. Every talk that was running in Glenorchy Township around Takahe, there was full house. It's such an amazing mobilizer of community. It's just something that everyone seems to get behind. So it's just been an absolute pleasure to be involved in, and it's been really, really embraced by the wider community. And we want every single volunteer to see the part that they played in this bigger project, not just the people who are directly involved. So that's a big thing for us, is really trying to bring the cohesive strategy, but also that the groups all feel involved under our kind of umbrella.
They're just such a great flagship species, and I'm glad that they're back where they used to be. So what does a release like that mean for takahe on a higher level, on a species level?
With takahe, the big thing was trying to find new release sites. So we're yet to see how many birds the reefs could, like what the capacity of the Reese Valley would be. So we've another release in autumn, another 34 or so birds. So we could have 100 birds in there, which would be just incredible when you consider there's 528 in the world and only half of them in the wild. So it's really can hopefully make a huge difference for takahe recovery long term. And the work that we're doing for takahe in the Reese Valley doesn't just support takahe. The same threats face kia, rock wren, other species as well. So it's important that you use those flagship species and those amazing conservation stories, but the same story is also valid for our work for protecting kia and things. So the flagship stories are really, really important, and it's important we do celebrate those, but it's one part of a wider project, much bigger project as well.
100%. We can never forget about the other species and the network of life that actually really goes on. But because takahe are so rare and in your project area now, is there a way for the general public to get involved and help with that particular species in particular when they use your area, say they're going for a hike and they see one?
Yeah, what has been amazing is seeing some of the feedback and some of the hut books, for example. People are seeing takahe. They're seeing a species that was declared extinct for a long time, that is really, really rare and difficult to see, and people are now experiencing them when they're walking the Dart Reefs track. Same in the Greenstone, which is Kaitahu Ancestral Whenua, and Doc have done an amazing job in partnership with Kaitahu and other groups to bring take back to there as well. And now people are getting to experience these wonderful rare species when they're out tramping. And that connection is so important. People will only protect what they care about, what they've experienced and things. So it's also that hope that we've talked about before, that people feel they can make a difference. So I guess it's recording your sightings. They are all different color. Like with Kia, a lot of birds are banded. So if you see them, you can, on our website, we've got a link, but also Takahe Recovery Group, you can log sightings at Takahe. Same for Kia. So a lot of our species, it's that citizen science approach. The more eyes we have on these birds, the better we can protect them as well. Volunteering, really important. You could join any of our partner groups, and donations. Us and all of our groups all need to do more conservation work. And to do that, we need more donations and ongoing donations.
Yeah, definitely. I think it touches back on the point we started with, collaboration. So let's just come back to that for a moment. Why is collaboration so important? And by coming together with Southern Lake Sanctuary, your 6 partner groups, and the public who gets involved as volunteers, as hikers, as trampers, as passionate advocates, how are you able to achieve more? Like, what other milestones can you achieve by coming together?
It's the added efficiency is a huge thing. As I said, our project's completely built on a collaborative approach, but a lot of the volunteer groups across the country, they're just heads down and bum up, just trying to get stuck in and do their mahi. And it's collaboration takes time, it takes resources. But for us, if we can share those resources across our partner groups, it's a much more efficient approach to it. Because again, the needs will change over time. So for example, if there's a huge project that we need more staff to monitor Takahe in the Reese Valley, we could use our staff from Wanaka, for example, to come over. It's having an adaptive management approach to conservation, increasing efficiencies, reducing redundancies in the systems. Because a lot of groups, they're just spending a lot of time doing funding applications, things like that. So if we can centralize some of that, if we can centralize training of volunteers, communications, all that, it frees up volunteers, it frees up staff to do more or focus their efforts and energies in other areas. So I'm a real believer in collaboration. As I said, our project is completely built on it and dependent on it. And I think we can point to quite a few successes that are resulting from collaboration and collaborative approaches, Takahe being one. The momentum in our community as well for conservation is incredible. We're starting to see more and more businesses and things seeing the importance of conservation. And we can't just rely on us greedy hippies to do the work. We need to be able to engage all facets of the communities. That's the scale of the conservation needs, but that's where it gets really exciting and where the momentum starts to really build. And when people can see the tangible benefits of the work, it's only going to increase the publicity and that for our native species.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I think it's also leaving our landscape projects and moving conservation into more urban areas. Can you tell us more about that? Because I know that you're actively doing that at Southern Lake Sanctuary and with your partners.
Yeah, so different areas have very different biodiversity values, but a really important thing in the urban and peri-urban areas is that community connections as well. So a lot of our partner groups are really active in the urban and peri-urban areas, and that's where you get your volunteers. That's where you get funding. That's where you get the hearts and minds. So it's important that we always acknowledge and appreciate that conservation work is needed everywhere. It's not just in conservation land. It's not just in backcountry areas as well. We need to do conservation everywhere. And that comes from engaging communities as well.
Just as a side note here, if you're interested in diving super deep on that topic, highly recommend checking out the episode we did with predator-free Miramar. Really great case study of that. But this touches on a point that I'm really passionate about, which is changing the culture towards conservation. In the Queenstown Lakes, the Southern Lakes area, I personally believe you're very forward-thinking. Are you starting to see a culture shift towards conservation?
Culture shift, I wouldn't say a culture shift, because I think it's a community that have always cared about Tataya, have always cared about the environment. What we are seeing is a greater appreciation for how much work goes into conservation and the needs. And also, if you imagine our region, as you know, is heavily reliant on tourism. That tourism is so dependent on the health of the natural world. So what we need, the shift in conversation, or the culture shift, I guess, is around seeing that our work, our collective mahi, adds to the value of the product of every business who are operating in this area. So it's trying to shift that mentality, I guess, that conservation isn't a nice to have. Conservation, it should be at the core of everything we do, because healthy environments underpin everything, the economy, everything. So that's the important cultural shift, I think, is that conservation becomes commonplace. It becomes more mainstream. It's not just us greedy hippies, as I said earlier, doing conservation, that every facet of the community is engaged, every facet of the community is helping. And it's not helping by necessarily getting out and trapping and things. There's many ways you can get involved, but we do need everyone to achieve these ambitious goals.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I appreciate the perspective on that. And I have this personal dream that one day we will measure the success of our society by the health of our environment. Imagine if, alongside the revenue or the profit of a company, they measured how much impact they had helped their nature. And you can go into many different areas of that. For me, I wear my identity on my shirt. Right now I'm wearing a Takahe shirt because we're talking about Takahe. But I'd like to just change gears and focus on the elephant in the room, funding. So how do you fund this amazing work? And what's your key to success to ensure that you have the runway to achieve long-lasting positive outcomes?
Excellent question. Yeah, funding is always the topic du jour, I guess, in conservation space and in a lot of charitable spaces. In environmentalism, we need to be thinking and acting long term, because otherwise you lose the gains. And it's really hard to do that when our funding systems aren't set up to be long term. We can't jump from 1 year funding to 1 year funding and in a really competitive funding environment. For perspective, a year and a half ago, we were having emergency meetings around having to mothball operations. So it is in an exciting space. We are looking to potentially scale up. I'm increasingly confident, but it is a really tough environment. Our funding now is a real patchwork. It's a quarter of different funders. It's granting space, it's philanthropic, it's donations, business support, like I'm sitting here in Hackett Bungee offices because they've been amazing supporters of our mahi. But these long-term relationships take time. They take resources. So we have to adequately fund groups to have the time to build up those long-term partnerships, because that's where good funding partnerships comes from, is time.
Totally agree, because not only does nature and what's going on not stop over winter while we can't access, as soon as you stop, it's just going to revert itself if you're only suppressing, which is the amazing mahi we have to do and continue to do. So let's say funding is solved and ongoing. What's the vision for Southern Lakes Sanctuary, let's say for the next 10 to 50 years?
Our mission, our kaupapa, is all around getting flourishing biodiversity, getting that through action, through leadership, and through collaboration. Our work is in line with Predator Free 2050, and where we want to be in 10 years' time, might be more like 20 to 50 years' time, is that it's normal for people to see a circus of Kia when you're up skiing. It's normal for people to see Fio in all of our rivers. Getting our native species back in good numbers where they should be. That's our long-term goal, and we will get there. It's going to take time, and it's going to take partnerships, collaboration, and funding, but that's where we need to go.
Yep, definitely. I think that's great.
Yeah, I just had goosebumps when you started about, seeing Circus of Care and more feel and just more everything. I think that's so enriching and also so good for us to reconnect back to nature.
Yeah, I keep thinking back to imagine what it would be like to be one of the first humans landing on this landmass. Now, we've shifted our baselines a lot from that to what we see today, but to see something closer towards that, what's possible, it just means so many different things. It's not just for seeing some birds or seeing some wildlife. It's for our sense of identity, our sense of well-being, the health of our economy. There's a lot of adjacent benefits. But I'd love to know, what do you think people can do in their own lives to help Aotearoa's biodiversity? Like, what are your top tips?
Get out and volunteer. Get out, support your local groups, because there are so many local groups for length and breadth of the country. All these groups need help. And another big thing is taking time, spend time in nature. Doc have run a beautiful new campaign, and we need to regain our connections to nature and to wild places. Really, really important. It's good for our mental health. It's good for our physical health. So getting people back caring about nature is really, really important. And we are seeing an increase in that. I think people are returning to our post-COVID, where people were stopping and appreciating nature more. And again, people will only protect what they care about, and that comes from building those connections.
100%, 100%. So before we wrap up today, Paul, here's one more big question. What does conservation mean to you?
As you hear, I'm a blow-in. I moved over from Ireland in 2009, I think, and I moved here because New Zealand is the best country in the world if you're a conservationist. There's so many rare and wonderful wildlife and wonderful species. I've got 3 young kids, and conservation for me is protecting those species so my kids, my grandkids can see them. I want to be able to look my grandkids in the eye and say, I really tried and wanted to do my best to protect our native species. So yeah, it's that kind of multi-generational approach to conservation, I think, is what it means to me.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful vision, and conservation most definitely is a long-term game. So for our listeners who want to get involved, how can they get involved? How can they find you and learn more?
Jump on our website. We've just refreshed our website recently, so it's www.southernlakesanctuary.org.nz. And there's also links there to a lot of our partner groups and showcasing some of their amazing work as well. And yeah, you can find us on social media as well. So
Cool. Awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. This has been such an interesting chat. You guys are doing really cool work.
you guys too. Yeah, no, I love the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, jump on their website. It's also down in the show notes. And yeah, kia ora, Paul.
Kia ora, guys. Thank you.